God of War was a great game about Kratos setting out to do the impossible, to kill a god. God of War took the world by storm with its great combat, story, and presentation, and really cementing PlayStation and Santa Monica. After the big success that was God of War, Santa Monica immediately started working on a sequel, and 2 years later, after the original game came out, we got that long-awaited sequel to God of War with God of War 2. Today, I'd like to take a deeper look into God of War 2 and see if it still holds up today, and see what it improves on from the original game and what it lacks. So without further ado, let's get right into God of War 2.
King Ares, Kratos, the once mortal warrior, became the new god of war. However, Kratos soon found himself alone on Olympus.
God of War 2 has a big upgrade in terms of technical improvements, since it was on the PlayStation 3 with better textures, models, and great detail. The game looks good enough for today's standard. The in-game cutscenes are alright, but the CGI cutscenes are spectacular and look like a movie. And you can tell that a lot of Santa Monica's budget went to the cutscenes because good golly, they look amazing. The title screen here is very reminiscent of its predecessor, with the title God of War 2 in the middle, with Kratos the God of War on the side. It's very similar to the original, which is a common theme here, which makes the game feel like a continuation of the original game. The set pieces in this game are amazing and are a spectacle to look at. The areas feel bigger, grander, and look better. Overall, there's a lot more worlds in God of War 2, like the Lair of the Titan, the Seeds of Time, and Destiny's Outrum. These are just a couple of the many new worlds and areas that Kratos explores, and all of them are unique in their own way. There's also a lot more personal interactions with Kratos, since there's a lot more characters in this game, and it makes the characters and areas feel more real. The game still has the option to have the non-full screen aspect ratio, making the game still look like it's shot like a film, with great perspectives, voice acting, and cutscenes. The soundtrack in this game is as good or even better than the original God of War. The orchestral and chanting themes are still in the music, with new elements of spark and flair. Each track is a banger and is great. The voice acting in this game has been improved, with Kratos and the gods sounding like they're actually expressing emotion. Everyone here does their part, especially Terrence C as Kratos. He really improves his voice acting from the first game, and in this game you can really hear his anger and anguish towards the Greek gods. One thing that I got to say has gone worse is the sound effects. There's a lot less sound effects in the game, and lots of the sounds that are in the game are just the same from the original game, which is disappointing in my opinion. But apart from that, the presentation is amazing, with big set pieces, great cutscenes, and better voice acting.
Zeus, your son has returned! I bring the destruction of Olympus!
At the start of the game, you basically have the exact same moves as you did from the first game. The only new thing we have is Athena's blades, but they're not really new because they're from the first game. I just say they're new because we never really got to use them in the first game, since we got Athena's blades at the end of the game. But it plays the exact same as the Blades of Chaos. But shortly after the start of the game, you lose all of your magic and weapons, and basically all of your health. And I kinda like this because it's a good way for you to get new moves, health, and magic and not be overpowered. And I also like it because you feel this high of being the God of War and brutally killing everyone, but then you're quickly stripped of all your power, making you feel like you are back at the start of God of War 1 on the Grecian Seas. I also like that Kratos talks to his opponents in battle now, which makes him feel like a real character. Let's talk about the combat now. The combat in this game is very similar to the first, which I think was a good decision because they didn't need to change anything, but just add upon what they did. Rage of the Titans is back, but a lot better now because you can turn it on and off in an instant, and I think this was a great change because now you can use as much or as little as you want to. It's also a lot easier to fill up the meter for Rage of the Titans, which I think was a great change for Rage of the Titans. You also get new animations and attacks, which is pretty cool in combat. Everything is mostly the same in combat, but they made some adjustments to make the combat more fluid. Like when you dodged in the first game, you'd stand for a couple milliseconds. It seems small, but it really ruins pacing in combat. But in God of War 2, when you dodge, you can continue fighting right after, so there's no standing still, making the game a lot more fluid. There are new weapons that Kratos can use in this game, like the Barbarian's Hammer, which is powerful and has brutal animations, but it's very slow, and once you start swinging the weapon, you can't stop until the animation is over. There is also the Golden Kraken fleets, which once you can perfect block an enemy's attack, you can reflect the attack back to them. You also have the Spear of Destiny, which lets Kratos perform deadly swipes and stabs, and could also fire dangerous piercing projectiles at enemies. And you also have the Blade of Olympus, which you can use in the after story and in the first mission of the story. The weapons are great, and I'm glad Santa Monica decided to add variety for combat. Magic also returns, and with magic returning, we get new magic abilities at our disposal. At the start of the game, we have Poseidon's Rage from the first game, but we shortly lose that magic and get new magic like the Typhon's Bane, which is a magical bow-like weapon and allows Kratos to fire rapid blasts of wind. We also have Kronos' Rage, which is an attack that uses electricity to strike multiple targets using orbs of lightning. The only returning form of magic here is the Head of the Oracle, which could be used to turn enemies into stone, which is basically Medusa's gaze from the first game. And the final form of magic is Atlas's Quake, which is a radical ground-pounding attack in which Kratos summons strong earthquakes to destroy enemies. The magic here is good, but I like the magic from the first game more. It had a more unique magic, and all the magic was balanced, but here some magic is useless like the Typhon's Bane, and some magic is pretty OP like the Atlas's Quake. It's unbalanced, which is pretty disappointing. There are now levels where you can ride on a Pegasus and fight while riding it, and it's pretty awesome, I can't lie. Flying in the air is awesome and fluid, and it feels comfortable because we use mostly the same controls we've been using, and fighting in the air is a great addition to the level design in this game. The level design in this game is as good as it was within the first game, with big grand areas with multiple ways to go in, areas and secret areas with bonus sections, and the first level is a great example of how good the level design is. The gameplay starts with Kratos dropped in a room with enemies after Zeus betrays him and gives life to a Colossus to hunt Kratos down. The first gameplay section in the room is a good and quick way to explain the controls to new players or old players that forgot the controls. After that, we see the living Colossus trying to slam us with its hand, showing that he will have a similar role to the Hydra from God of War 1. Soon after that, we're greeted by the Colossus again as he tries to hit us. We then shoot an arrow at the Colossus while riding on the arrow, and we get our first interactive cutscene, which is pretty dope. The Colossus then throws us to the other side of the city where we have to go underwater to continue. We then get reintroduced into platforming to fight the Colossus again, where we have to hit him as we dodge his punches. He then throws us to another side of the city where we get our first puzzle, which is cool but pretty easy. We then make our way outside, and Zeus offers us the Blade of Olympus, and we use it against the Colossus. We then break into the Colossus from the inside, where we do some combat and platforming, and then we destroy the Colossus from the inside, making this a great first level and showing how great the level design is. There are a lot more boss fights in this game than God of War 1. The first boss fight in this game is the opening mission with the Colossus, which I just talked about, so no need to talk about that again. The next boss fight we have is versus Typhon, kinda. He isn't really a boss, but more of an obstacle, and really is just a way for you to get the Typhon's Bane. The Dark Rider is a mini boss you fight when riding on your Pegasus, and it's a pretty typical fight, but fighting him in the air is a great spectacle to look at. The fight vs Icarus is a short but cool fight, and it's mostly an interactive cutscene. Those are the mini bosses there. They're pretty cool but don't last too long. And the first real boss fight is vs Theseus, which is the guardian of the Steeds of Time. The fight starts off with you fighting him normally. This continues until he's weakened and gets you out of your reach. Theseus then summons ice shards and minotaurs, and you have to dodge the stuff he throws at you while you're shooting at him with the Typhon's bow. And it's a rinse and repeat from there. This fight is pretty cool and has a brutal ending. The next boss fight we verse is versus the Barbarian King, who has fought Kratos before. We start off with an interactive cutscene, which turns into a boss fight, which is pretty neat. The boss fight involves you dodging his horse and then turns into a one-on-one fight versus the Barbarian King. This fight is good, and the fact that Kratos knows him adds a bit of that connection we need to enjoy the fight. And after the fight is over, we keep his hammer, so overall the fight is great. The next boss fight is versus the sister of Medusa. She can turn you into stone in an instant, making her a big threat and keeps you on her toes. Thus the boss fight is good, but it's very similar to the Medusa mini-boss from God of War 1. The next boss fight is vs Perseus, and he's probably my favorite boss fight in the game because Perseus can turn invisible, and you have to use your ears to hear his footsteps and your eyes to see his splashes. When his invisibility is gone, he tries fighting you with a sword, but when that's gone, he uses his shield to blind Kratos. Each phase adds something new to the fight, which I like, and at the end, you throw Perseus out of a bathhouse to his death. From there, we fight the last Spartan. This fight is good because it's the first fight in the franchise where you have to fight in a 2D 3D-like style, and the fight is visually stunning with shadows on Kratos and the Spartan. But the fight is just Kratos beating some Spartan up normally. There's no real gimmick to make the fight unique, apart from the 2D aesthetics. Right after that fight, we then fight the Kraken. In this fight, we have to drop the fallen Spartan from the previous fight on a pad that will lift us in air for us to damage the Kraken. We then have to climb up his tentacles to reach the same spot. The fight ends with us pulling a lever that crushes the Kraken. This fight is good with combinations of puzzles, platforming, and combat. We then reach the Scissors of Fate, and we first fight we have is versus Lachesis, where she follows us around and eventually she'll start firing energy beams that you can reflect back to her. She'll then throw energy beams at the floor, and then we have to dodge the floor by grappling on the hooks in the room. We hit her a couple of times after that and she's down. From there, we fight her sister Atropos. She sends Kratos back in time to the battle with Ares, where we have to protect the sword of the gods, and in the final phase of the fight, Lachesis and Atropos team up to try to beat us, and they combine attacks, which makes this boss fight hard and exciting. The next boss fight is versus the final sister of Fate. The goal is to lift up levers to pull an axe-faced pendulum and ram it through her face. This boss fight is quick but fun. The final boss is versus the king of Olympus himself, Zeus. We start the fight with Kratos fighting Zeus with the blade of Olympus. Eventually, he'll be harm enough to shrink it to Kratos' size, where you have to have a one-on-one fight with him until you get an interactive cutscene where you stab Zeus and you're about to kill him, which we'll talk about in the story section. Overall, most of the boss fights are great, and it shows that with more quantity sometimes means more quality. Platforming is great, as it was in the first game. They made small tweaks, like that you can jump over multiple stairs while climbing a ladder, and you couldn't do that in the first game, or like how now you can slide down walls using the R1 bumper. It sounds simple, but those simple changes make for a smoother game experience. There's also a new grappling feature replacing the ropes from the first game. They make you swing like Spider-Man, are a great way of traversal, and are a big evolution from the ropes, and some sections with them are freaking awesome. The other way of traversal is with Icarus's wings, which you get halfway in the story, and they're really cool because you can glide long distances. The puzzles in this game are great, but a problem I have with them, or not them, but the game itself, is that it gives you hints. In God of War 1 video, I said that one of my favorite things in games is that the game didn't tell you to do anything, or give you any hints, or help you in any way. But now that there's hints for puzzles, sure, it can be disabled, but still having the option open to you anytime makes the puzzles a lot easier. Overall, the gameplay in God of War 2 mostly surpasses the gameplay of God of War 1, improving on it and expanding on it in great ways.
Olympus tremble at my name. Zeus is weak. Ares and Athena are dead, and I wield the blade. We can win the Great War, but not in this time.
God of War 2's story starts off where the original left off, with Kratos as the new god of war. And just like Ares, Kratos' power has made him a bringer of war. Zeus fears that Kratos will try to overthrow him as the king of Olympus, and Zeus ain't having none of that. So he takes most of your godly power and kills you in cold blood. But Kratos isn't over yet. The Titan known as Gaia revives Kratos and tells him the only way to kill Zeus is to seek out the Scissors of Fate, who control time itself. Before you set out on your new quest, you find a Spartan warrior and tell him to rally up any soldiers he can. You find your journey through ancient Greece, regaining all of your lost power. You ride Pegasus to places like the Island of Creation and even go back to the underworld. And finally, you find the Temple of the Fates. You kill all of the Fates and acquire the Loom of Fate in order to return to the point at which Zeus betrayed you. Kratos surprises Zeus and seizes the Blade of Olympus, but it looks like Kratos will lose again and surrenders to Zeus, but at the last second, he incapacitates him. Athena intervenes and tells Kratos to stop, as by killing Zeus he will destroy Olympus. Kratos ignores her and tries to kill Zeus, but Athena sacrifices herself by impaling herself upon the blade, granting Zeus' escape. Before she dies, Athena reveals that Kratos is actually Zeus' son. Zeus was afraid Kratos would defeat him, just as Zeus had defeated his own father, Kronos. Kratos declares that he will kill Zeus and kill anyone who gets in his way. He then travels back in time and rescues the Titans just before their defeat in the Great War. He returns with the Titans to the present, and the gods watch as their former foes climb Mount Olympus. Kratos, standing on the back of Gaia, declares that he has brought the destruction of Olympus and is ready for war. And that's the ending. It ends on a cliffhanger, which on one hand I like because you don't really see games have cliffhangers. Most games have an arc and then it's over. So I do like how God of War 2 flips that trope on its head. But on the other hand, the cliffhanger doesn't make the story feel complete. With God of War 1, you felt satisfied with the journey you went on and felt satisfied with the ending. But with God of War 2, there's still so much story to be there and just isn't, and you have to wait for the third installment to see the rest of the story. The story here has more lore, more characters, and more payoffs than the original. We found out more about Zeus and his past and his connection to Kratos. we found out more about Kratos, and we see a lot more compassion with Kratos at times, like with the last Spartan warrior, but Kratos also grows more angry and revenge hungry, and see that progression is great, and all culminates to us caring for the characters more than we already have. There's also a lot more side characters from Greek mythology, which I love, and all the side characters have more personality and character, which I like. The start of the story is great, Zeus killing Kratos and Kratos barely escaping hell, and is a great plot setup, but then the pacing goes downhill after that. Still though, the story is good, I just prefer God of War's story better.
A choice from the gods is as useless as the gods themselves. Even now, as you draw your last breath.
God of War 2 is not just a fantastic game, but a fantastic sequel, which expands and improves on basically everything from the first game. The level design is great and the combat seems to be perfected, and I'm curious to see how God of War 3 expands on the combat, because the combat here is amazing. The game has its issues with unbalanced magic and the cliffhanger, but the positives definitely beat the negatives, and God of War 2 has aged beautifully since 2007. Hey guys, thank you all as always for tuning in and watching the video. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you have any feedback, I'd love to hear it. I enjoy and appreciate all of you guys' comments. My next video will either be another God of War video talking about Chains of Olympus. I'm not a God of War channel, I know I make a lot of God of War videos back to back to back, but that's because I honestly love this franchise. But after that, I'll probably make my Infamous 2 video or Arkham video. But yeah, thank you all for all the support. I love you all, stay healthy and take care.